Hi there, Rebecca Koffler here with Censored But Not Silenced, and I'm going to give you a quick intelligence brief on something that happened yesterday in Beijing, China, as the Chinese President Xi Jinping was hosting Russian President Vladimir Putin and several other world leaders for the military parade that the Chinese staged for the whole world to see the type of military hardware that China possesses. So supposedly there was a hot mic incident. At least that's what the Western media reported. That the hot mic caught Xi Jinping and Putin talking about immortality. So I'm going to tell you exactly what happened and why it happened and why we should care. We meaning the United States and our allies. So here's exactly what happened. As the Chinese and the Russian president were walking together up a red carpeted ramp, the hot mic supposedly caught Putin saying this to Xi through a translator, of course. Putin does not quite speak the Chinese. He does speak English, but he does not speak Chinese. So here's what Putin said. Human organs can be constantly transplanted to the extent that people can get younger, perhaps even immortal. Here's what Xi Jinping responded. It is predicted that by the end of the century, people in the future could live to be 150 years old. So, first of all, bottom line up front, as we say in intelligence, it was not a hot mic at all. It almost certainly was not a hot mic incident. This was a deliberate, what we call strategic messaging that Xi Jinping and Putin, the so-called strategic allies, were sending to the West. So let me unpack this for you. Both Putin and Xi Jinping are 72 years old. Both of them will almost certainly be leaders of their respective countries for life. Putin already has been in charge of Russia for a quarter of a century. He became the Russian president officially in 2000. He was handpicked by Boris Yeltsin. And so he's been president ever since. With a minor exception of 4 years when Dmitry Medvedev took over for him as sort of a de jure president, but de facto Putin was still running the country behind the scenes. And then he amended the constitution, Putin did. And so he's going to be the Russian president likely at least until 2036, and then if his health allows him, which is what this whole thing is all about, he will do something else to make sure that he remains president. And the Russians love him, by the way, contrary to what you hear in Western media. So Xi, of course, is also planning to be the leader of China until his health allows him. Both of them, or rather, right next to them, there was a younger guy, the Rocket Man, the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. He's in his early 40s, and he was smiling as this exchange was going on between Xi and Putin. Something of note none of these leaders have a succession plan, right? So unlike in the United States, when leaders change every uh, at least 4, sometimes 8 years, if a president wins 2 terms, those guys, they are there for life. So what that does is continuity of government. The message that they were sending to us is to the West was that you're going to have to deal with us whether you want it or not. So President Trump right now is having a really, really hard time to deal with Putin and with Xi, because those two are really flexing the muscle there. President Trump wanted to solve the Russia-Ukraine conflict. That didn't happen, and I talked on my other podcast about why that is unachievable. Now, President Trump engaged effectively in the economic warfare with China. So there's frequent conversation, constant actually, not just frequent conversation in Western media and in the political circles about Putin and Xi being dictators, and like there's all sorts of like emotional adjectives being used, including by politicians, specifically towards Putin. Putin is a killer. He is this and that, because there's a sense of impotence on the part of U.S. establishment as far as how do you deal with this guy. And so these two have now united, and they're basically saying, you will have to deal with us no matter what. So what they were talking about is actually is transhumanism. Immortality effectively is transhumanism. What is transhumanism? It's a scientific, philosophical, and even cultural movement that is aimed at extending human life with the help of technology. What kind of technology? Genetic engineering, cryonics, artificial intelligence, and nanotechnology. Nano means miniaturization. It's nanotechnology of electronics that go into all sorts of military components, weapons systems, civilian application type of electronics and whatnot. So the idea is to augment human capabilities and extend life. And it's getting more and more traction. Some of the, wealthy people, businessmen are into this sort of thing. Elon Musk talks about that. Jeff Bezos talk about that. So what are the implications? Why do we care? The implications of this transhumanism and the fact that America's top 2 tier 1 adversaries, right, Russia and China, are talking about that. Well, the implications are huge. Number one, the geopolitical implications of this are enormous. And that is, again, whether we like it or not, we have to deal with Russia and China, who have a completely different way of governance, right? It's a central planning type, strong state that is pretty much holds primacy over the individual vis-a-vis the typical democratic societies. Even though, from my standpoint, we are America is looking more and more like Russia and China and the USSR, as far as I'm concerned. With the same like censorship, and there's all sorts of things that have been going on for years that the people didn't know about until the whole deep state exposed itself with the Russia-Trump collusion, and so this whole basically right now, a lot of things are coming up. So a lot of people have been targeted with censorship. You can't pretty much learn the truth anymore from traditional sources of media. So you kind of have to go to people have been banned from the official media, such as Megyn Kelly, is delivering the truth. Who else? I mean, Tucker Carlson is pretty good. Bill O'Reilly, and others, Bannon. Anyways, the next implication is even bigger for the transhumanism, and that is a implication for next generation warfare. Because the Chinese are actually working on enhancing or developing rather a cyborg soldier as part of the so-called intelligentized warfare, right? They are trying to develop a creature, a cyborg, if you will, with military robotics and technologies that enhance human soldiers, right? So to make sure that a soldier can be more durable, can endure more, more weight, that, carrying all of that military hardware, can remain in the field for longer without, let's say, food or water. So even in military drills, the Chinese People's Liberation Army has showcased the so-called robot wolves. They're four-legged, armed robots that operate along human soldiers. So if you think that the drone warfare that pretty much transformed the battlefield in Ukraine, if you think that's advanced, think about what is coming. And the Chinese are working on that. And I don't have right now intelligence to support an assessment on whether the Russians are working on it. I don't rule that out. But at this time, I don't have specific intelligence to point to this. But the Chinese almost certainly do. Right? And the difference between how they approach, they meaning Russia, China, and how we, the West, approach AI, artificial intelligence, and transhumanism are very different, because the West, there are a lot of, people who are God-fearing people, right? And God did not intend for us humans to live forever. So there's a concern in the West when it comes to transhumanism, and we are not as let's say aggressive in developing it, so that there's still some constraints. Well, not with the Russians and the Chinese. They couldn't care less about what God intended for us to do or not to do, and so it's the implication is that they're going to be ahead of us just by virtue of not being morally constrained about that. And so where do they get all those, they were talking about organ transplants and stuff. Where do they get those organs? Well, they get them from political and religious prisoners. And organ harvesting is a thing in China. It's the Chinese deny it, but it is. We do have intelligence that points to the fact that we can conclude with relatively high confidence that that is done. And so another implication would be for what I would call a immortality tourism. if let's say a Western, wealthy person wanted to use those technology to extend his or her life, and let's say those things are not available in the United States, whenever they become commercialized, like whenever whoever is the first that's going to commercialize that type of thing, which likely is going to be China. My assessment now, it's going to be China, not us. So if you as an American cannot get it done here in the United States, you can go to China and get it done. And that's another message that the Russian and the Chinese presidents were delivering to Americans. So that's pretty much it. If you'd like to get up to speed on what transhumanism is, there's an excellent book by that I can recommend called The Dark Aeon by Joe Allen. So it is really frightening. It is really frightening the where we're going with this thing, the collective we, the world. And so yes, that's the end of my intelligence brief. As a reminder, I am an independent strategic intelligence analyst. I don't work for any government agency, U.S. agency, or any kind of agency not affiliated with any government organization. I use my sources and my methods that are, my own tradecraft, and I have a very strong track record of accurately predicting behavior of people like Putin and how wars unfold. Specifically, the Russia-Ukraine war, which I predicted in my book, Putin's Playbook, right here, a year before it actually happened. And just to stress that I am not affiliated with any agency. I speak for myself. This is my official analytic line when I present that, and I make it publicly available so that if the U.S. government or President Trump's administration or anyone else wants to use my analysis, they can see, what my thinking is on certain highly consequential issues, such as President Trump's peace plan for Ukraine, which is unachievable, and then another project that President Trump has taken on, such as a trilateral denuclearization deal with Russia and China. That one is unachievable too, and you have that intelligence brief available for you online. If you like my briefings, please follow me on X. My handle is @Rebecca0132. I'm also on YouTube, Rumble, Getter, True Social, and Facebook. Thank you for joining me today, and I'll catch you later.